Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Live Healthy Now. Thank you for joining us today for what I'm sure will be a very insightful and informative conversation. I'm joined by Stevie Snow, who is a holistic pharmacist, and she is going to help us explore cardiovascular health, which is so important. And I'm sure that you're probably hearing that term and thinking, oh, what's this? I haven't really heard about this. And that's exactly why we are having this conversation today, because it isn't something that many of us are really that familiar with. And certainly women, as you're going to hear, who really should know more about this. We really need to explore and get familiar with what this is. So welcome to the podcast, Stevie. It's lovely to have you.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you so much, Nicole. It's so great to be here and see you, your beautiful shining face, and to bring this important message to your listeners about how cardiovascular disease in women is so under the radar, but yet is so important for us to know more about and to know exactly what it is we can be doing on a daily basis to help minimize our risk, understand our true risk, and take the right steps.
Absolutely. So we're going to get stuck into all of that. But first, I just want to find out a little bit about you and your most impactful healthy habit. What helps you to feel good every day?
Okay. So, well, as a pharmacist for over 30 years, I found working in a hospital setting that we're not really helping people live longer, healthier lives with medication. And when I had my own personal health history with PTSD, depression, insomnia, Hashimoto's, thyroiditis, all these things, I crashed and burned. And what got me better wasn't pills, procedures, or doctors. It was focusing on food, knowing food is medicine, and mindset, breathing techniques, exercise, these things got me feeling better. And that just catapulted me into what I do now. I no longer work at the hospital. I do holistic care. I take care of clients virtually and help them get well and stay well.
Mm.
And then I would say that my most important habit for getting well, I'm just going to show you a visual. It's this on the back of my arm here. I like to test and not guess. This is a continuous glucose monitor. I know after every bite of food how much blood sugar I have in my body. And right now I'm struggling with that, even though I don't know, 15 pounds overweight. I'm really close to my right weight, but I'm having serious blood sugar issues, which I've never had before in my life. I tested, it was all great. And I think I had a mold exposure. And I think that has set me off for a path of disease if I don't head it off. And so testing and not guessing, using the tools at my disposal, glucose monitor, blood pressure monitor. My doctor was kind enough to prescribe this for me. And it's using the tools available to us.
Yeah, that's a great habit to share. And it's something I would love to do a full podcast episode on, because I'm really fascinated myself by the blood glucose monitors, because there's so much, as you say, information and insight you can get. And there's also people on the other side of the fence who aren't so pro them, which is, like I say, another conversation in itself. So yeah, that's fascinating. Okay, so let's kick off with cardiovascular health and disease. And when we say that word cardiovascular health, I think a lot of people know what cardio is because we think about it in the sense of exercising and know it's something to do with our heart. But yeah, perhaps just break that down to give people real clarity over what we mean when we talk about cardiovascular disease and health.
Okay, and I like to really include not just cardiovascular health, but brain health in this conversation, because anything that causes a heart attack can cause a stroke. And it's all about the vascular system. Like, it's the same arteries feeding your heart. Well, not exactly the same, but in a different location. But what affects the arteries feeding your heart affects the arteries feeding your brain. And so Alzheimer's is also could be in this conversation. And so when we're talking about heart health, we know that our aerobic activity can help improve our cardiovascular health, and that's a wonderful thing. But we all are very much aware that heart attacks kill a lot of people. But I wonder if women know their true risk. And so let me ask you a question. Perhaps you know the answer because we've been talking about this for a minute. But what's the number one killer of women? And what did you used to think it was, and maybe what do you think it is now?
I think I used to. I'm not sure if I really knew what it used to be. I probably would have said dementia, I think, or Alzheimer's. I know from being in this space and depending what page you land on when you Google this, it can show up. I know in the US, it's definitely cardiovascular disease. Here in the UK, or in England, actually, England and Wales, since 2011, it's been dementia has been the biggest killer of women, but very closely followed by cardiovascular disease.
Oh, okay. Well, I had expected you to say cancer, honestly.
Mm.
That's usually the answer that I get to that
Hmm.
question. Here in the US, the number one killer of women, of course, is cardiovascular disease. And a lot of women believe that it's actually breast cancer. But in fact,
Yeah.
one of 100 deaths a year in the US, 30, sorry, three, 1 in 30 would be due to breast cancer. 1 in 3 is due to heart disease. 1 in 3
Mm.
deaths is due to heart disease. And if you combined deaths from all cancers, it still wouldn't amount to the number of deaths that we have from cardiovascular disease. And so what we're looking at there is, there are different ways that the heart can get sick, but I think the most important one to drive home about is the importance of preventing a heart attack. Heart attacks are caused by a blood clot in the arteries, feeding the muscle of the heart. And when the parts of the heart don't get enough blood flow, the tissue dies. And that's what
Mhm.
causes the pain and the other symptoms that we have, and what can either lead to immediate death or get you to the hospital is that blood clot. And that's the same process that can go through in the arteries feeding the brain. So I want to really include stroke prevention in this
Mhm.
conversation.
Yeah, and when you touched on cancer there, certainly I think from a female perspective, cancer's what's feared the most, breast cancer being that number
Mhm.
one scary thing. And I do talk about this a lot when I give talks and run workshops. And people are really shocked, women especially, because when they hear, that breast cancer is 95% curable, and cardiovascular disease kills twice as many women as breast cancer does. They're kind of like, oh my God, I didn't know that. And then, as you say, when you break down further the stats around women with disease and then women who have early death because of it, they're just absolutely shocked, because we do live in fear of breast cancer. And if people have experienced Alzheimer's or dementia, you are generally scared of that, especially if you've had a parent go through it. But yeah, it's just something that we don't hear about. And also when it comes to women, and you mentioned heart attacks, that can look quite different and is often misdiagnosed, so no diagnosis at all. Or when it is diagnosed, it's quite a lot later than what men would generally be diagnosed, which leads to often a much more progressive type of cardiovascular disease that's harder to treat and manage, isn't it?
Yeah, very well said. When a woman presents to the ER, the emergency room, in the throes of a heart attack, the younger she is, the more likely she is to be misdiagnosed as being having a panic attack
Mm.
or pneumonia or gastrointestinal reflux disease, GERD, and given completely the wrong medication and sent home because they're not doing the right testing, having to do a lot with how women present when they have heart attacks. We don't have the typical necessarily have the typical symptoms of a heart attack, which would be crushing pain, a squeezing of the chest, an elephant sitting on our chest, or pain in our left arm. Those are very common for men, but women present sometimes with shoulder pain, neck pain, nausea, vomiting, dizziness, a sudden sense of doom, and right arm pain, or just indigestion, and or a sudden confusion, like really confused and they can't explain why. And so we blow off those symptoms. We're like, oh, that was just a weird thing that happened to me. Can't be a heart attack. I don't have any of the other symptoms. Or we go to the ER and the same thing happens. We give our symptoms and the doctor's like, what they have to do when you go to the ER, what you want to demand if you ever think you're having a heart attack, and I really want to encourage your listeners to think, if there's any thought in your mind, I'm having a heart attack, go to the ER. Do not delay care. Time is muscle. The longer your heart is deprived of oxygen, the more cells that die and the harder it is to recover from that. But also to pay attention to those symptoms, don't dismiss them. And when you get to the ER, demand a blood test called a troponin or cardiac enzyme test. And so the enzyme test that is like, this is you, if you're having a heart attack, these numbers are high, period. And EKG won't necessarily tell you you've had a heart attack. And often they'll just do the EKG and say, you're fine, go home. But we need to check for enzymes. And those are released when cells of the heart die. When the tissues actually die from lack of oxygen, they release these enzymes in the blood that are not there if cells are not dying. And so it's just like a no-brainer.
Great advice. And this isn't always going to be a heart attack either. It's not a case of, oh, well, you only have cardiovascular disease or a health problem. When you've had a heart attack, there's lots of illnesses and things that cardiovascular disease can cause as problems that you have to potentially manage and live with for a long time. And that's what we're seeing, isn't there? There's a lot of women who are diagnosed and then living with cardiovascular disease, even from quite a young age. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's all related. And let me just back up one step before we talk all this doom and gloom about disease, is that the most important thing to know about heart attacks is even the World Health Organization, the WHO, thinks that 80% of all heart attacks are preventable. 80% are preventable. I say that number is closer to 95%. This is a really preventable disease. And why are we missing it? Why is it still the number one killer of men and women, at least in the US? It's because we're looking for the wrong markers. We're not paying attention to the right kinds of cholesterol. Half the people who die of a heart attack have normal LDL cholesterol, and yet we're blaming LDL cholesterol for heart attacks. And the reason is that not all LDL are bad. There are 4 different kinds of LDL, and you need to know which ones you have with testing in order to find out your true risk. And so a lot of women have a heart attack, but have cholesterol of a teenager. And yet they're still put on a statin afterwards. And like, if my cholesterol was fine, why am I on a statin? And why did I have a heart attack at age 45? And it's because there's different types of cholesterol that we want to check for. And in the show notes, at least, I know we don't want to get too deep into the science in this conversation. In the show notes, at least, I would love to list, these are the tests that I say go get. Go get these 10, 15 things. You can order them yourself in the United States. So I imagine LabQuest or somebody might be available in the UK for you guys to be able to do that as well. And those are ApoB, LP little a, things like that. Those are the ones that I would say go and get those checked and know your true risk, because it could get missed by your doctor because they're not aware of this, and because insurance generally don't pay for these tests. And they're not even expensive. It's a $20 test and a $6 test here in the US.
And I think here in the UK on the NHS, I'm sure of Dr. Chatterjee, who's a really big doctor here, and his podcast, I know you're a fan, he's shared some of this on his podcast about the tests that are readily available, but to your point, have to be asked because doctors aren't routinely giving them, but they're very cheap, very accessible for free. And so, yeah, it's about asking. And I know when I had my cholesterol tested recently and they just said cholesterol, I was like, okay, so what's the LDL and what's the HDL? And they were quite taken aback. And I didn't know tons about what each of those meant, but I was familiar enough to know that I should ask rather than just get a top line figure and be told it's high because that's what it said, but then to break it down. So that's interesting to know that LDL needs to be tested further. But kind of, you touched on, this isn't about throwing lots of doom and gloom at people. We want to highlight that this is a massive risk. It's something as women we're not educated and informed about. We, as we said, fear breast cancer predominantly and potentially other cancers. Yet we have this very real risk that is, as we said, globally the biggest killer of women. And I always say it's the biggest risk to women's health globally because it is so proliferant. So I know there's no one answer to this because there's lots of research we need to do. We haven't had a lot of research specifically on women and on women's heart and cardiovascular health. But why do you think, like, what do you talk to your clients and people you know about why women are really experiencing these heightened rates of cardiovascular ill health?
I really do like to focus on blood sugar. It's really about our diet. It's also about
Mm,
lifestyle factors. And so, one of the beautiful things about preventing heart disease in women or anybody is that anything that prevents a heart attack also prevents stroke, cancer, dementia. So this is a holistic way of looking at it. And when we go downstream instead of upstream, so if we go after we're starting to feel bad and we just address the symptoms, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, high blood sugar, and we just throw drugs, procedures at those, we're not addressing the root cause of it. And so we want to go downstream and say what's causing it. And usually it has to do with lifestyle factors. This is really
yeah.
what it's all about. We think it's genetic. Some people blame their genes for that. And it is true. There is a heart attack gene. There is an LP little a gene, which is like a silent killer. People who are perfectly healthy, young people working out, riding their bikes 25 miles a day on the weekends, dropping dead of a heart attack, even though they were in quote unquote perfect health because nobody looked at their genes, and specifically this LP little a gene, which is the mass murderer of young people with heart attack. And so you just need to know if you
Mm,
have this gene and look it up. So genetic testing is great, but your genes are not your destiny. Your lifestyle is your destiny. So the genes may load the gun, but the environment pulls the trigger. And what is environment? The environment is the thoughts we entertain, the people we hang out with, how much sleep we're getting, how well are we dealing with stress, what are we eating? Is it processed food? Is it whole food? And about how are we moving our body? How are we hydrating? How clean is the water we're bringing in? What exposures to toxins do we have? Are we filtering our water? Is there arsenic in the tap water? Are we eating a lot of rice? Rice has not only high sugar but high arsenic, and arsenic has been linked to heart disease and cancers, particularly breast cancer.
mm. One of the big things that I try to talk about and is kind of behind why I do what I do is to change this narrative about what health means, because for lots of women, health is about the way you look, isn't it? It's your size and shape. Many of us have grown up in a culture obsessed with diets, with weight, with the size that you are, the shape that you are, and all of that being linked to your worth and value, and how good you are, and so on and so on. And so many women are like bogged down with dieting to lose weight, and often those diets aren't nutritionally healthy. It's kind of like, well, I'm counting calories, but I can go to McDonald's and have a Big Mac, and I can still have, a bottle of wine twice a week, like that kind of thing. And this is where you and I and others like us are trying to help educate that there's so much more in the food that we eat. And you said food is medicine, and I love that term, and I really enjoy other people who talk about it in that way. And I talk about it being fuel, and fuel not just in terms of energy, but in how optimally you work now and in the future, as you say, both body and mind as well, from a psychological point of view, as well as the physical aspect of the brain. And so, yeah, let's dive in a bit then with food, because as you
Mhm.
mentioned, blood sugar, and
Mhm.
sugar for women, especially when we hit that perimenopause and menopause phase of life, which is then the rest of our life, sugar and what we eat is so important, and therefore can have such an impact on diseases that we're talking about like this.
No kidding. And it's hidden
Mm,
everywhere in processed foods.
yeah.
Ketchup. I found it in mole, some just like bean juice. Mexican bean juice had sugar in it. Toothpaste will have sugar in it. And it's so pervasive that it's very difficult to get away from, which is why a whole food diet, a paleo diet, if you're interested in generally, there's no one diet for everybody. But what is found to be the most heart healthy diet is the paleo diet, which is kind of a moderately high fat diet. And those are quality fats. And so when in the 80s we were told to go low fat, that was actually probably that one piece of advice has killed more people than anything else ever done in world history. Telling us to cut our fat was the worst possible advice for heart health and health in general. And it's because, number one, the brain is mostly fat. Every cell of the body has a membrane. It is made up of fat, and it is an essential nutrient. We can't make certain types of fatty acids, whereas a lot of people think, oh, carbs, I need carbs to live. But there's no such thing as an essential carb. There's essential proteins and there are essential fats. We can live without carbs. The body can make all the sugar that it needs. And we are wired to get sugar, right? Oh, it's ding, ding, ding. Dopamine goes off when we eat it because it used to be so hard to find. It was only available certain times a year in fresh fruit. And if we wanted to survive winter where there was going to be no food, we needed to be motivated to shove food in our faces. And so we ate all the fruit we could get our hands on. So we were nice and fat for winter. And so when people say, oh, eat lots of fruits and vegetables, I'm like, no, eat a lot of vegetables. If you eat a lot of fruit, you are going to overtax your liver because it can only the liver can process fructose. So when we eat sugar, table sugar, it's half sucrose, half glucose, half fructose. And the sucrose can be used by every cell of the body. The brain loves sugar, the heart loves sugar, but fructose only can be metabolized by the liver. And so when we drink soda, when we drink fruit juice, or if we juice a bunch of fruit and we just mainline all this fructose without any of the fiber that should come with that food when we eat it, like a whole apple, instead drink apple juice, all of that goes to the liver. The liver is overwhelmed. The mitochondria are overwhelmed. They shut down. We feel tired. And the body is dealing with this toxin as if it were alcohol. If we drank too much alcohol, the body would immediately shut down all its defenses. No repair. We're not going to heal the body. We're not going to rest, and we're not going to exercise, and we're not going to make a baby. We're going to deal with this toxin and we're going to get it out of here. Well, the same thing happens when we drink fruit juice or drink a soda, or just anytime we consume too much sugar. The body deals with sugar like a toxin, and our health is shut down in the process, and it makes us more susceptible to infection. Studies show that when we have high sugar in our blood, which is anything more than a teaspoonful. So we think of, you can eat so many grams of carbs in a meal. There are 4 grams of carbs in a teaspoon of sugar, and that's how much sugar is in our blood at any one time, 1 teaspoonful. And if you took the label of ketchup and you saw, oh, there's 12 grams of sugar per tablespoon, and I put a tablespoon on my burger, then I am basically getting 2.5 times more sugar than my body can even metabolize at one time from a tablespoon. So we need to be looking at our labels. We want to avoid processed foods, find recipes for making the stuff ourselves. And I know that cooking may not be something that we are used to doing. Most people have actually gotten away from it for convenience, but I believe that's the number one thing that we can do for ourselves, our family, our health, our longevity, is to cook at home from whole foods and get away from packaged foods.
And yeah, like you said, some people are quite far off being able to live that way, their habits and lifestyle, maybe budget as well. And especially people who've got, several kids and they all have different likes and dislikes and habitually have got used to eating certain food. It can be a lot to shift. And that's where sometimes working with a coach can help to gradually create new habits and so on. But I think as a starting point, something you mentioned there about labels is really good advice, is just to get familiar, like be curious about what's in the food you're eating. Because, for example, I was with someone last week and she was saying that she has these high protein snack bars. She said, what do you think of these? And then we had this whole conversation, about all of those hidden things that are in there, not specifically talking around sugar, but just around all of the fake things that are in there, the chemicals, the preservatives, the modifiers, and yeah, lots of things that aren't real food that go into some of those types of snack bars. which, although labeled high protein, are not really the protein that our body needs, and obviously we're being marketed at. So, just get familiar, because again, people can think, oh, I'm having muesli for breakfast, this is really healthy. But look at the ingredients and see what is in there, and use ones, if you do need to buy one, find a one that is minimally processed, and doesn't have added sugars and so on. So I think just get familiar. And the big one is bread.
Oh,
Bread is probably one of the most ultra processed foods that many people would think is fine. It's a nice loaf of bread I'm buying and it's good quality. But yeah, if you looked at the ingredients and, as you say, the amount of sugar that's hidden in things like that, which we just don't think about. We think of the sweets and the chocolate and the cakes and the biscuits.
exactly. I mean, there's so
Mm,
much you said there. There's so much I want to
mm,
unpack in what you just said because it was very, very important. But let's just go back to packaged foods and how to read a label and what I
mm,
recommend. My basic rule on a package is that there can be no more than 5 ingredients on a package for it to be considered an okay food to eat. And all 5 of those have to be things that you would cook with anyway. Garlic,
mhm,
pepper, tomatoes, onions, sweet potato, lentil, those kinds of things, stuff you would already cook with. But if it's MSG or it has these crazy names for sugar, let's see, it could be called maltose, sucrose, you could be, there's just hundreds of names for
mm,
sugar. Or then there's this chemistry, right? There's just all these chemicals in there that you would never cook with, EDTA and polysorbate 80. And like these are destroying our health. And so we may think that eating healthy or cooking or buying whole foods is more expensive than packaged food, and I say it is not. When you shop the outside edges of the grocery store, at least in the U.S., that's how they're set up. You got produce over here. Skip the bakery and go to the deli, and he gets some whole meat. Anything that doesn't have a label on it, an avocado doesn't necessarily have to say this is an avocado. It
yeah.
just is, right? You just want to eat those things, and you want to eat those healthy fats, because I think I kind of skipped over that. So when we go eat healthy fats, that's going to be avocado, olive oil, coconut oil, and avoiding those over processed seed oils. The seed oil is Wesson oil, canola oil, safflower oil. These are bad oils. And if you looked at that protein shake, that is going to be a lot of bad oils in there. So when we were told to go low fat, at the same time, we were given all these fake fats that the body doesn't even know what to do with. And there's a theory that those are preferentially put into the cell membrane of our cells when they are eaten, because the body doesn't know what to do with them, and it makes the cells rigid. And then we can't, number one, absorb nutrients into the cell, and number two, we can't get rid of toxins that are
Mm,
created in the cell as part of natural metabolism. So when we eat sugar or protein or fat, the body has to utilize those, and we make all these metabolites. And if those toxins can't get out of the cell because the cell membrane is not healthy because it doesn't have the right kind of fat, that you feel terrible. You feel bad. You're tired. You're exhausted. Your body says you're going to sit on that couch and you are not going to exercise. And so if you feel tired, if you're exhausted all the time and you're depressed, or you are craving these certain foods, I want you to know this is not your fault. You are being targeted by the food industry, and your body is doing the best that it can do in order to deal with what it's being dealt. And so if your body is saying sit down and don't move, then it's because you're toxic on the inside, mostly because of food. So go to the outside of the grocery store, eat whole foods, minimize your processed foods to things that only have 5 ingredients and stuff that you would cook with anyway.
mm. And I do encourage people to not get overwhelmed by this kind of information we're giving them, and think about it in small steps, like incremental. What's one thing you could cut out of your shopping list that probably is something you didn't realize, like the muesli or the bread, or and just train yourself and get used to that, and know that, like you say, we are kind of swimming against the current with this as well, because we have this huge industry out there feeding us literally with all of this crap, and whether it's through the marketing and then the food itself, so we're in a culture generally in most developed countries anyway, certainly in the UK and US, where, it the food is designed to be addictive,
Yep.
to be attractive to buy as well, and so there's so much more that goes into it. But kind of to bring it back, we were chatting about women, and I was saying women in particular, like sugar in itself is something that can really lead to these types of illnesses we're talking about, can't they? Because of the inflammation that it can cause, the whole knock-on effect that having sugar and what it does to your body and raising your insulin and the glucose levels and so on. So for women especially, we need to be mindful, and again, it's some women only start to think about this because they've started to put weight on in midlife, but actually our hormones are still changing, whether it shows itself physically in weight or not. We've got to, as you say, kind of manage this upstream before it takes effect and causes a downstream, heart or brain health problem.
Right, and it's never too late to get healthy,
Mm-hmm.
and start that thing, but do know that prediabetes, diabetes, high blood sugar, it could be detected 10 years before it develops symptoms bad enough that your doctor is gonna say, "Oh, you have high blood sugar." 10 years before that, you have
Mm-hmm.
high triglycerides. So a lot of people think that triglycerides has to do with heart health, and it does, because having high blood sugar is bad for your heart and your longevity and increases your rates of cancer and Alzheimer's. And that is related to triglycerides. The higher your sugar intake, the higher your triglycerides are going to be. So think of when you're looking at your blood work and you see high triglycerides, don't cut out fat and don't blame the egg. The egg is not the problem. The FDA finally in the United States, like 13 years ago, finally got their heads around this. There's no limit on the amount of cholesterol you can eat in a day because it has almost no effect on
Mm-hmm.
what your cholesterol levels are. It's all about the sugar. It's all about the carbs. And when you mentioned eating muesli for breakfast, I cringed because we've been eating dessert for breakfast for far too long. Eating cereals, pancakes, bread, bagels. Oh, don't get me started on bagels. That those will spike your sugar so bad and completely wreck your day. If you want to have a beautiful day, start with a savory breakfast. Eggs and bacon, eggs and sausage. And don't worry about cholesterol and don't worry about the fat. Your body needs the fat. And the more fat you eat, the more satiated you will be and the fewer cravings
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have and the more level your blood sugar is going to be. And so when we have a huge spike of blood sugar after we eat muesli, oatmeal, pancakes, anything sugary, a Starbucks drink or a soda or juice, our sugar goes up, the insulin goes up, and the insulin brings that sugar down, and that's a hard crash. And the minute your blood sugar drops, your brain says, I'm dying. I'm going to die. I cannot have low blood sugar, eat more food. And so that is this vicious cycle that we're in. So I say start your day off with a savory breakfast and see how much better your day goes and how fewer cravings you have, more energy you have, more alert you are. And, so then you can make the right choices. When we're exhausted, we're tired, and we're
Mm.
frustrated, and we're starving all the time, and we feel deprived because we're like, I can't eat sugar, I can't have cookies. When we want those things and we deny ourselves of those things, then number one, we're not enjoying life, and we're more likely to make poor choices, which are eat the sugary food, eat the bigger portion of food, stay up late, don't go to bed on time, be stressed out, misbehave, and then wake up the next morning feeling guilty for all the things we did yesterday and then it goes on and on and on. So I say, just like simple thing, eat a savory breakfast and see if you can't avoid making wrong choices that make you regret things and
Mm.
start off the next day even in a bad way.
And I think one of the things I would kind of piggyback onto that, when you were talking about the blood sugar and the spikes that you can experience, and again linking this to women, is a lot of women who are on these diets, and I was one of these in the past, think that you need to eat little and often, or you need to have your three big meals, but you need a snack as well. And again, in midlife, you can can have been a certain person and eat a certain way, and then whoa, that changes because of our hormonal imbalance and the irregulation that's going on and so on. So yeah, thinking about that as well, because often a lot of the sugar we are getting is coming through snacks, because a lot of the snack food is the ultra processed foods, the ready stuff. So trying not to snack, I think, is a big one. And as you said, when you eat the right foods, then you don't need a snack. And this is something I share with people, that when I started to change my nutrition, probably about 7 years or so ago now, and really switched the way that I ate, I was no longer hungry. Yet I'd always done those slimming club things, get weighed every week and count your pints or your sins, and eat little and often. And I ate everything low fat. It was, when I think, I'm like, oh God,
Uh,
because that's what you were taught. And all of the snack bars, and it doesn't matter because they're only 99 calories and so on. And, I was always hungry, and some of it was habit as well, waiting for 11 o'clock to have that mid-morning snack. But now I don't need a snack. Maybe the odd times, sometimes I know it's linked to tiredness, and because I don't snack often, I might think, yeah, I'm going to have something, but I'll have a few nuts or maybe an apple and nut butter, or, like that kind of thing. Um, but yeah, I think when you are snacking a lot as well, try and look at that, like, strip the snacks out, eat better meals, have your fiber, have your fats, fill yourself up in a good way. And, think about that, because all of those peaks, which we call the blood sugar roller coaster, they're very damaging in themselves, aren't they? As you say, we're constantly pushing this insulin and trying to manage the glucose, and then cortisol gets involved. And so it's just this one big mess, if you like, of our hormones, which again, for women who are dealing with the symptoms of menopause and the changes, just exasperate it all, don't they?
Oh, absolutely, and it's all interconnected,
Mm.
and yeah, everything causes everything, and so, yeah, we're in our 40s and 30s and 40s, and we can just diet or exercise, and we lose some weight, and then we hit 50, and suddenly, the belly fat just accumulates, and there doesn't seem to be anything we can do about it, and it mostly has to do with your hormones, and not, it's just like stress is usually the problem. And so finding ways to reduce stress is going to be like one of the best things, another of the great things that we can do for ourselves. And how do you reduce stress? I don't recommend meditation as a first stop for a lot of people, because our brains are not necessarily the best neighborhoods to hang out with, right? We so much negative self-talk about our body image, about, things that we're doing to ourselves that we like, I want to do better and I don't seem to do better. Like, you don't want to spend a lot of time home alone with the brain. So the best way, right? Like, I think it was Louise Hayes who said, like, my brain is a bad neighborhood and I should never go there alone. I used to start with a breathing technique and
Mm.
mindful breathing. And so you don't have to close your eyes. You don't have to sit cross-legged. You just, and when you do this, the box breathing, have you done
Yeah, I love,
yeah, good. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Ladies, if you're not familiar with box breathing, check out her podcast she did on breathing, because that little bit, just mindful breathing can do so much to lower our stress levels. And that is what's going to help you lose weight. And you wonder, how do I get rid of fat? When I burn fat, does it come out in my urine, in my poop, in my sweat? Where is it coming out? It's coming out in your breath. That's where
Yeah.
fat leaves the body. And so, yeah, we want to exhale. Now, you can't just exhale yourself to being fat, but you also can't get rid of fat without doing a lot of exhaling. So this deep breathing exercise is not only good for the
Mm.
brain longevity, but to help you lose that belly fat. And the belly fat isn't just unattractive. It isn't just uncomfortable. It is actually the worst fat for our longevity. When we have that belly
Mm.
fat, it's inside of our organs. And when our liver has fat inside the cells, it can't do its job right. And when it's in our pancreas and in other organs that are very vital to repairing the body and dealing with this onslaught of toxins and things that we're exposed to every day in modern life, that fat is interfering with the body's ability to detox. And we have to be really good detoxers. And so Getting rid of toxins is really important, and getting rid of that fat. So you can't just exercise it away, but you can breathe it away, pops. And then I say that, a good breathing exercise, mindful breathing, box breathing, holding your breath, doing any kind of breath work is great. I like Max Strom for this. Do you know who he is?
Max Strong. I'm not sure I do.
Yeah, he's just wonderful. He's got a great book out. I forget the name of it because I read it such a long time ago, but he did a great TED Talk recently. I'd love for you to put in the show notes Max
Mm.
Strom's talk about breathing and how important it is to breathe more than it is to meditate in
Hmm.
order to lower our stress levels.
Yeah. The breathing is definitely something that started to really gain momentum and interest, isn't it? I've had a couple of guests on who've delved into breathing. It's something that I've tried to incorporate more of, and I think there's even more going to come in the future about this, because again, as humans, we've learned to breathe incorrectly, which it's a bit like people think, well, I'm breathing every day, that's how I'm alive. But yeah, we again, because of all of our stress and our fast-paced lives and just how we are, and everything's just so interlinked, isn't it? And I say stress is like the maestro of the orchestra, that's in control. And for midlife women who I support, particularly through their perimenopause journey, it's something that you have to look at. You could count calories, reduce the sugar, and try to exercise a bit more. But then if you are really stressed and you're constantly in that fight or flight state, you're just again facing that uphill battle, aren't you? So it's got to be that holistic approach. One of the things I wanted to ask you, Stevie, which you'd mentioned, and this isn't something I know a lot about, well, much really, I've heard it talked about, is the benefit of eating the alfalfa. I can't say it, sprouts.
Oh, yeah. I wanted
Yeah.
to make sure. I really want to talk about broccoli sprouts. Like, I want to put that in the show
Oh,
notes,
yeah.
ladies. If you haven't made your own broccoli sprouts, this is like takes minutes a day, and it's the most cancer-fighting food there is. So eating broccoli sprouts, really important for our health. So easy to do. It's $4 in the US when you buy this little package in the store. But for 40 cents, you can make a jar this big full of these sprouts, and they have such amazing ability to help the liver detox. So if you want to support your liver and you want to prevent cancer, you just want to be healthier, I say
Hmm.
add broccoli sprouts to your routine and not eat alfalfa sprouts. I wanted to bring up that we do not want
Right.
to be eating alfalfa sprouts.
So
They
it's a no
actually
to,
have,
right.
yeah, that's a
And
no.
what are they? What I don't think, I don't know if we really have them in the UK or if they're called something else.
Well, you just take the seed of an alfalfa plant and you put it in exposed to moisture and you get a sprout. So it's the root that you would have in the ground if you were growing alfalfa, and
So
you can
I
just
don't think we use alfalfa. I think that's
okay.
why I didn't know how to pronounce it.
Ah,
So
this
I'll have to Google it, because maybe that is something completely
oh.
different here. Like we call eggplant aubergine, totally different. So
Oh,
maybe it's
yeah.
just it exists, but it's something else. So I'll
Sure.
check that out. And broccoli sprouts, is that from a broccoli plant, and is that why they're
It
called broccoli sprouts?
it's from the seed of the broccoli. So
Hmm.
if you
Right.
eat broccoli, it contains sulforaphane, and sulforaphane is that compound I said that has great cancer fighting or preventing properties. And in the seed itself, there's 100 times more sulforaphane than in the broccoli.
Ooh.
Now,
And
I'm a
would
big
you
fan
just
of
add them
broccoli.
into? Yeah, I love broccoli. Would you add the sprouts into salad?
Yeah, and I did make a great video on this, so and it's in the show notes, you guys. So take
Right.
a look at that. You can just eat them as a salad. I would put the sprouts in a little bowl, little olive oil, little vinegar, salt and pepper, chew it up really good because the more you chew it, the better the chemicals are activated. But you can put it on a salad, you can put it on your
Hmm.
eggs, you can stir fry it. Lots of ways to get the broccoli
Hmm.
sprouts inside the body.
Oh, brilliant. And one of the things that Stevie wanted to highlight, which we haven't got time to dive into, because again, we could do a whole episode just on this, is, there's lots of misinformation out there, but there's also lots of, I think, confusion, because, there's different opinions on nutrition, especially even when it comes to exercise. There's still, a bit of, I think, difference, of opinion, certainly when it comes to midlife women and cardio, and whether we should do it, whether we shouldn't, in terms of intense training and so on. But I think Stevie's given us quite a bit of information to include, which I can't put it all in the show notes because the podcast platforms literally won't take it all. But what I'm going to do is put
Oh,
it into a Google Doc, Stevie, and
okay.
I'll put the link into the show notes. So you have kindly given us a freebie, which is to grow the broccoli spreads, which I'm definitely going to have a look at. That's the video. So I'll put that link in. And then she's given some guidance on some of the more reputable people that if you do want to check out on social media to have a look at, and so on. So we'll pop, some of the things we've talked about into there, and you can just click on it and get that information for yourself if you are interested in more. And I think just kind of to wrap us up, Stevie, what would be like one take home tip you would want to give someone when we are here to help them build new, healthier habits that they could, speaking predominantly to women, because we wanted to focus in on women and cardiovascular and metabolic health as we have done. What would you give them as a bit of a take home tip?
I think the take home message here is that self-care is not selfish care. It is essential. And if we're always as women caring for other people and we never want to be cared for ourselves, well, caring for other people all of the time and not caring for ourselves is a great way to make sure that you are going to have to be cared for by somebody else later on. So take the time now, care for yourself, eat good food, get to bed on time, avoid toxins, move your body, and the best exercise is the one that you will do. Don't do too much, and certainly don't do too little, but do whatever you want to do. Move your body every day if you can. And then I say take care of yourself, because if we don't, then later on someone's going to have to care for us, and that's the last thing we want. And when we're healthy, we provide our light to everybody. When we have the energy, the whole world benefits from women. This is why I love working with women so much, is we care for other people. And the more energy and vitality that we have within our own body, the more capability we have to care for others. So if that's what motivates you, then you got to put yourself first.
Oh, very well said. Yeah, and I'm totally with you on that. I think I always say it's women who have the power to change the world. And so we need to be strong. We need to believe in ourselves. And that all comes when you are taking care of yourself and you feel really good. You feel mentally, capable and believe in yourself because you are healthy and have that vitality. So yeah, that's a great way to wrap up. So I'll pop everything into the show notes, but just let people know where you can be found if they want to connect and find out more. Obviously, if you're in the US, you can connect and see if he can give you lots of tips on the tests that you could take and so on to help find out some of these markers and get that information for yourself.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I do offer a $15 30-minute consults to anybody who wants to talk with me. And even if I don't, can't help you, I can help find someone who can help you with whatever it is that you're going through right now. And my company name is RIMBY, and RIMBY stands for Right in My Backyard. That's where I believe health begins, is outside in the sunshine, but also within each and every one of us. Our backyard is like inside of us. That's where health begins. So RIMBY Health, Right in My Backyard, RIMBY health.com.
Brilliant. Thank you. Oh, thanks so much for your time and sharing all of your knowledge and being really passionate about it all too. I'm sure it's going to have, helped lots of people to think about this for themselves and their family as well. That's the important thing, isn't it?
It really is. Thanks so much, Nicole. I really appreciate it. It was a pleasure
You,
being here.
you're welcome.